Hello there, welcome back to Charles Circle and welcome back to Captain of Industry. Last time, we spun up Update 4's headline features, adding amphibious vehicles to our fleet and using them to create this magnificent bridge. It's a bit of a bridge to nowhere right now since we don't need to be on this other island just yet, but we'll cross that bridge when we come to it. So today, it's time to bridge the gap between the early game and the mid game. At the end of last episode, we upgraded to Research Lab 2's, establishing a bridgehead in the next section of the technology tree. From here, we have about 1 million directions we can go, and they're all good. We have to start somewhere though, and we're currently backed up on oil byproducts to the point where we're flaring off heavy oil. I can try to juggle prioritization over at the gas boiler running the oil power plant, but ultimately we make more collective byproducts than we can consume, so we're lighting the excess on fire, and I hate that. So we're going to focus on some refinery techs that can fix it. We're going to start by researching Naphtha Processing, and I'm going to go ahead and queue up thermal desalination, as well as power generation 3 for good measure. We'll be working in these areas anyway, so we might as well chain a few of these upgrades together. So while those technologies are researching, let's take a moment to articulate the problem itself. The core of the issue is that we've increased our diesel demand with all of the bigger and better vehicles we've added recently, which means that our refinery is running at top speed, essentially continuously, 100% on both of our distillation modules. The good news is that we're able to keep up with the supply required for that because we have upgraded and have now actually fully ramped up the production of our oil rig to 120 per minute, and that does seem to be able to keep up with our total diesel consumption. But the fact that we're running at full capacity here, increasing the amount of diesel that we have to produce, also means that we are increasing the volume of byproducts that we are generating. We've increased that so much more, in fact, that it is more than we are collectively capable of consuming over in our oil power plant. This is exactly the same problem that we had back in the day when we set this up, right? It fixed the problem by increasing the consumption of those byproducts. Now that our generation of those byproducts has increased above what we're currently able to consume, we've drifted out of balance again. And that's the art of refineries, maintaining that delicate balance between your primary driver, diesel, and the byproducts, because you can't generate one without the other. So to rebalance those ratios, we're going to tackle this from 3 directions. First and foremost, we're going back to the well, no pun intended, and increasing our oil power plant capacity. This will, of course, increase the consumption of byproducts, and we can do this productively because our power demand has also increased. This power plant is currently making 8 megawatts of power, and I think it's pretty clear at this point that we could probably increase that to 12. So a 50% increase on capacity and throughput here would help out, I think, a pretty good amount. The other thing we're going to do, using this new technology Naphtha Processing, is turn our light oil into naphtha and fuel gas in the stage 3 distillation machine. This will, of course, consume one byproduct, the light oil, and replace it with naphtha and fuel gas, which can still be burned for power, but unlike light oil, can also be used as an input for other production chains. And the last thing that we'll try to do is reduce diesel consumption, thereby reducing byproduct generation. Now, the most obvious way to do that is the fuel saver edict, which we already have up, but that's not the only place we consume diesel. The other place is out here at our rubber maker. Now, we don't have the recipe yet, but one of the things that we're going to get from the naphtha processing technology is the ability to substitute in naphtha for diesel in the rubber maker. And that's kind of the flip side of point number 2, but I think it's worth pointing out separately, not only are we going to find a way to increase the consumption of that byproduct, we're going to replace diesel. So it's going to do 2 things, 2 sides of the same coin, but it helps from 2 different directions. So where we can start in the meanwhile, though, before we finish the technology, is to simply increase our throughput here, right? So naturally, I talked about how I wanted to leave room to expand this turbine and then immediately built our basic desalination in the way of our power generators. Typical. But we are going to replace the desalination here with a superior tech. That's the next one I queued up shortly. So we don't have to wait, though, to at least install this. We can put another turbine over here. And while I would prefer, of course, to put the 2 power generators in this space, it can be placed over here for now, and it'll work just fine. I'll probably rearrange later in order to keep myself organized. It works, it's completely functional without that, but I'll probably get around to that. So let's dive in here and add those machines. So that's these guys placed. I'll go ahead and get them built, but we will have to create more steam as well. So we'll need to create another boiler and another cooling tower. I also realized while I was doing that, we were still running part of our steam accidentally into the smokestack here, which is a bit of a waste, not the end of the world. We'll clean that up. But we will need a third one of these. These first tier cooling towers are 1-to-1 with the high pressure turbines. So we'll get one of those in there, and we'll need another gas boiler, as I mentioned. And we'll want to make sure that it runs on sort of the same priorities here. So we'll want to make sure that we can pick the byproduct that we want to burn through most, and also that we are able to give it water through the recycling priority loop that these cooling towers feed back into. So I'll connect up all of that pipe work here in a second. All right, so coming out of the same fuel balancer, which, by the way, let's reprioritize real quick to be light oil. This is the juggling that I don't care to be doing actively, but this will come through here, and as it still provides to this gas boiler, it will also now start to provide to this gas boiler. Same thing is true with the water. The prioritized recycling input is still here, and our steam now comes out here in a larger pipe to handle the increased throughput, and will come along here to these various turbines. The other thing we should probably think about doing then is increasing the throughput, on this pipe, because we are now up over 60 finally for 3x24. And I went to get this connected and naturally we have a little bit of dirt here that is keeping us from connecting in a convenient and orderly manner. And so rather than adjusting the aesthetics of this build, we are going to spin up an entire terraforming crew to work in this space. I wanted to anyway. We needed to clean up around the edges here. All right, a little while later, we have our full 12 megawatts now being generated out of the power plant here. We just need our crew who's on their way to come over here and clean up this area, and we can build this last cooling tower and stop boosting to make up for it. But otherwise, everything is working according to plan here. Let's rebalance again. We'll hopefully burn these down and not have to worry about it so much in the future. But until then, we'll just sort of juggle this in the background. Two other quick updates while we are waiting for the technology to complete. Last time, we noticed our settlement demand for water had increased above the 48 that one of these groundwater pumps will give us, and it is now very nearly pushing up against the 60 that this single pipe is capable of transporting. So let's just go ahead, get out ahead of this so that we don't forget and then end up with a Unity crash later. But let's get that upgraded. And one other random thought. Thank you to everyone who shared with me that this is called either a boat ramp or a slipway, depending on your geographical location. Boat ramp is correct from where I currently live, apparently, but I find that a pretty lame name. So shout out to all of the UK folk who refer to this as a slipway. I've decided to label it as such. Got to give them something since we're going right-hand drive over on our roadways. So that'll be our concession to the left-hand crew here. Okay, so we have the naphtha distillation technology. Let's talk about what it does. So in the same way that the distillation stage 2 building simply took the direct output of stage 1, this will take the direct output of stage 2. So 30 light oil will go into the stage 3 machine. It'll also take a little bit of steam to run, and it'll spit out this naphtha and fuel gas. One quick thought. 54 light oil is required to run a gas boiler, and it's the exact same amount actually of naphtha required to run a gas boiler. But we actually produce less than the 30, and we create this 12 fuel gas. That 12 fuel gas is 1/6 of what will run a gas boiler on the fuel gas side. So just looking at, collectively, what percent of a gas boiler do these components run, it's less collectively than the light oil itself. So something to keep in mind. We are not solving for power generation via oil. We would not do this if we were, but we're not solving for it. We want naphtha and fuel gas for their actual uses as components. We're burning oil as byproducts simply because we need to do something with it. So what we'll end up doing here is placing one of these at the end of each of these modules, and any expansions that we make from now on out in this area will also contain all 3 stages. That means we're going to have to make some changing to our pipework. It doesn't require any additional hookups to outputs here. We don't generate anything we have to dispose of in the sense of like sour water or anything. It won't create any more ammonia or sulfur coming out of this process. What it will do, though, is mean that we are no longer creating or exporting this light oil product. But we'll just replace this entire line and storage with naphtha, because naphtha can do all of the same things that light oil can. We can put it into the gas boiler and burn it, which is basically just what we're doing with light oil right now. That's it. But we can also, as we mentioned, swap it in for rubber. So we'll take the current diesel output that's existing right now in this out of this buffer, and we'll swap this line to be coming from the naphtha outputs as a primary use for it. And our output storage here, this will become a naphtha output storage, and we will use it as we do here for light oil to run the steam for the entire refinery itself, and we'll pass any excess out this way and even use this exact same storage for excess naphtha to burn for power. Easy enough. The fact that it requires an additional bit of steam, but doesn't give us anything that would give us back through recycling more water, does mean, as I think I mentioned when we first set this up, we are no longer going to be a net zero closed loop water system. So we are going to have to start bringing in a little bit of water in order to run all of this. It's going to certainly fit within the capacity of our existing gas boiler. We have 60% downtime in this gas boiler right now. That's no problem, but it'll start to consume more water than we actually get back when we recycle. No issue. It's all of 6 per minute if we're actually running this at 100%. And so that means one of our large trucks has to come by every 10 minutes and drop some off. We can set it up to a better thermal desalination setup on the coastline here once we have that updated, but we can also just let this be manual. It's no worries at the volumes that we are currently processing. The other thing we'll have to do is move all of these pipes, but that's pretty straightforward. They're also going to the same spots. So what I'm going to do then is hop into a bit of a time lapse and go ahead and place one of these at the ends of each of these situations here. So I'll clear all of this out, slide this over, connect it directly, and adjust the piping. I think we covered all of the changes, but if I realize along the way we need to do something else, I'll make sure to talk about it on the other side. See you soon. All right, I think we are officially up and running at full speed here. We made a couple changes to the pipework because we just substituted our naphtha in for our light oil line, but we do have a brand new output fuel gas that we will have to consume, right? And for now, we're not going to set up a storage or anything. We're just going to run it right back here to be consumed directly for power because, well, we're already running in excess of it from out here, so it's not like we really need to send it out to the base just yet. That may very well change over time, but it's fine for now. So we are, I think, running at top speed, which is great. We did swap the naphtha line to come out here. We seem to be running just fine on rubber with the new recipe, and I believe that this is all working as expected. The one thing we should do is change out here now that we've run through the final store of light oil. Brilliant. So this recipe essentially is no longer important. But I think we've probably got a couple bits of light oil in the shipyard from cleaning all this up, if I had to bet. Nope, never mind. Even better. So let's just go ahead and remove this recipe entirely and go back to no import. Cool. Between that and the fixed up ground area here, we have, I think, put in all of the changes that we wanted to. We have a higher throughput on our oil power plant. We are burning off still some ammonia, but it seems like that's it on the byproduct front, which I'm pretty happy to see. It's good. Should help with our health. I don't know if you noticed along the way, there was a disease that made it a lot worse, but I believe this should have helped our air pollution. Let's take a look. Even if it hasn't quite yet, I'm sure it will. Yeah, it doesn't seem to have made too much of a difference here, but our health had been under 10 and is now finally above 10, which means I might even feel comfortable taking off the health boost edict. It's getting pretty close to 10. We're going to leave it. The nice thing about the health boost edict, it says it costs 1. It does, but not in the net, because you get unity back for having higher health, right? So, for example, if we go here, we'll see that we actually get a direct amount of health in terms of unity for the health level that we have. And so if we're getting, 0.34 for the 7 that we have here, we could probably get 0.5 if we have another 10, right? So it still costs, not 0, it doesn't pay for itself, but it does heavily subsidize itself in terms of unity, that particular edict. And it's a good one at this phase of the game before we have all of our pollution amelioration technologies in order. Cranking up more refugees in order to staff all these new buildings. We've got the space. I did add another one of these housings out here. And yeah, we're going to tick over that 60 in just a moment, which is fine now that we've upgraded the pipe, but that's why we needed to do it. Very good. All right, so we'll work on the power generation tech next, but I think it might be worth talking about the thermal desalination tech. So one of the solutions, besides just trucks, which is fine, as we said, to needing a bit more water here would be an improved version of our existing basic distiller. So what we do for that is the same seawater pump puts the same seawater into a slightly different building, this thermal desalinator. What you'll see is it can take any level of steam, the sort of higher level steam that we are used to using for power generation, etc., the depleted steam that comes out of that, the super depleted steam, or the steam low and then steam depleted, but these are all sort of steps down. The lower version, the lowest version of it, in fact, can still be used here. And you'll see that each of these takes the smaller remaining energy and it creates less and less water from the smaller and smaller amounts of seawater. So it's higher throughput, the higher energy you can put into it, but you still get something. And I find these are a great way to use sort of leftover or unaccounted for steam, which we will get to in a bit here. But for now, basically, I think what we're going to end up doing is saying, well, we need some water in this area. We have a gas boiler that has some spare throughput to make more steam. Why don't we just set up a thermal desalinator right here? So what we'll do is place one of these guys here, and then let's pull up that building, the thermal desalinator. Nice thing is, these things hook up very conveniently. 108, 108, at least with this particular recipe. So that's lovely. I do appreciate that. And we'll be able to sort of using this same area set up the same logic of, well, we need to make sure that we make salt and we need to dispose of the excess. This won't be super high volume. Like we said, we don't need a ton of water in here anyway, but really what I'd like to do is just move this setup anyway, so we might as well. And it'll save us on coal, because that's what we're spending in the meanwhile. So I'm gonna hop in here. I don't know exactly where it's gonna go, but I'll play around with this setup and we will reclaim this space for our power generators to go on the correct side. So see you in a moment. All right, so we are currently boosting just to make sure that we can catch up on the water that we were currently missing. We definitely ran a little bit low out here at the power plant, but we'll catch back up in a second here. This should be plenty in the longer run. So last thing I'll do, clear this out. I wanted to make sure that our salt was definitely reachable by export here for our trucks. The smaller ones can get under sort of a level 3 pipe, but that is not going to be sufficient to come over here anymore because we've stacked our pipe wall even a little bit higher. But I think that should finally be the end of the new setup. Good. So let's trace it. So water comes in here still, right? That's what we've tried to backfill. This is the new thing that we're doing, is supplying water in this area. We are still prioritizing the water that is coming from the recycling loop, the sour water stripper, but we are supplementing it, and this will even get very nearly full from the new thermal desalination. And in fact, I think we can probably stop boosting this and switch this back to the 1x power recipe. The water also comes out here, as it previously did, to help to backfill the water required for the oil power plant. We're sending some excess up here. Assistance for this water reservoir, which is very nearly full, making this very nearly obsolete, which would make me feel a lot better if we didn't have this ugly looking pipe going up and down this janky looking hill. So sooner rather than later, we'll take care of that. The leftover brine, of course, still comes out to the same set of priorities. We try to make sure that we're full on salt before we dump any of the brine, but we do have to be able to dump the brine. So this is in a slightly different position, but the exact same set of logics. And finally, we have moved over with room to expand our power generators. And so we can, I think, finally also clear that out, which is good because the next tech that we're about to get is going to help us expand in this direction and further in this direction, frankly. Very good. Very good. All right. So we should still, we still have plenty of headroom left over here to run additional things via the steam coming out of this boiler. I suppose we can remove the light oil recipe at this point. It's going to be running on heavy and naphtha. We are still going to prioritize the naphtha. And yeah, I think we're in a good spot here. does this, now that we're at capacity, are we running? Yeah, so this is perfect. We've actually decreased the amount of time that we need to be running here. We're actually consuming less crude overall because we've reduced our diesel consumption over here, right? These were running at 100% in order to keep things full. Now they're running at less than 100% to keep things full. So we have room here to grow our diesel consumption and still be covered by our current setup. Cool. All right, so what I'll do, I'm going to make sure that we don't make any other changes by the end of the episode, but at the end of the episode, I will blueprint this, not because it's going to be a convenient one-click upgrade like I tried to do over here for our Research Lab 2 setup, but just as a reference for you at the end. It's too much deleting of pipe work to really, I think, be point and click like that, but it'll at least be a helpful reference potentially. Very good. All right, so let's come back when we have Power Generation 3 tech, and then we'll be done working in this area. See you in a moment. Okay, so we have the Power Generation 3 technology, which allows us to build low-pressure turbines. What does a low-pressure turbine do? Well, it takes the steam low, which is the output of our high-pressure turbine that we are currently trying to return back into water in the cooling tower, and it produces even more mechanical power, and it spits out a steam-depleted byproduct. And so, for example, if we were to take this output, this 24, we would get another 50% of power for free, basically, because we would still get this steam-depleted output, which we still get 12 water for. So there's exactly zero reason not to build these. It is free additional power. It is a free plus 50% addition of power. That's pretty great. So we want to get these into our turbine here, but of course we've got a little bit of a terrain issue, so I'll make sure to have our trucks flatten this out here. But we'll go ahead and spin these up pretty much instantly. This is an extremely helpful technology that we would like to implement ASAP because, again, it's free. Okay, so that should do it. We are spitting out all of our steam low. It's coming along here, and where we used to send it over to these cooling towers, it simply continues along, comes up here, and is inputted into these low pressure turbines once we have enough of it. And then the output of that, the depleted steam, comes out and around and back into those exact same cooling towers using the exact same recipes. So now we're getting 50% more out, which is great. Just in time to run out of fuel gas and our various byproducts. We did too good of a job over here. Isn't that wonderful? The good news though, of course, is that we can install this at our coal power plant, which is firing in the background as a backup. So let's go ahead and do that as well. And similarly here, the steam high still comes in here to our high pressure turbines. They spit out their byproduct steam, and that is sent, the steam low is sent over here to our low pressure turbines. We're getting 50% more power for it, and the same now depleted steam is going along the exact same route into the same cooling towers. And we've simply added another 2 power generators here where we previously had 4. So this costs us, again, no more water and no more coal or oil. It is simply free power. So I'm very happy to have that. I guess it's free minus the maintenance cost, the workers, and the initial cost to build, but like, it's free. It's very good. So the next technology that we're researching, electrolysis, I'm primarily doing because I kind of want to work towards getting the wastewater treatment plant, the incineration plant, and then eventually exhaust filtration sorted. I would love to get our health back up because our pollution just keeps getting worse and worse. These are a trio of excellent mid-game technologies that will be very happy to implement. They'll help us avoid pollution, but we'll also get something back from it. So it's wonderful. We need electrolysis along the way. It helps us primarily produce the chlorine that's required for the wastewater treatment setup. However, the other thing it can do is turn any of our excess ammonia into nitrogen, which we can vent off, and a little bit of extra hydrogen. Normally I consider ammonia to be like much more valuable than these components here, but given that we are currently, maxed out on fertilizer, I think it might be worth avoiding the intermittent burning off, flaring that we do with our ammonia. So maybe we'll implement that as one last machine here in the refinery area for today. Let's take a peek, see how it looks when we get there. The other thing we could do while we're waiting is do some tofu, do a little bit of soybean processing. So we haven't actually yet provided a protein category. So this would help us give a sort of a health bonus to diversity of food provided. You get it per category, right? And it would also take off the pressure on some of these other categories. Not that we have much pressure, but why not do it? So let's talk about how you make tofu. So you go to this food processor building. There will be a few recipes that we can use here eventually, but this is the primary building, or the first one we get in the building, and the one that we'll primarily use, I would say, for at least quite some time. Soybeans, which we grow directly as a crop in farms, take a little bit of water, which we can pull off of one of these pipes here. They take some sulfur and some limestone, which is an interesting addition to the taste palette, I suppose, and it spits out tofu and some animal feed byproduct. And we run already the animal feed byproduct from the mill out this way to be composted into organic fertilizer. So we have a lot of what we already need, basically. We even have the limestone and the sulfur. We just use those for fertilizer right now. So what we could do would be to slot this in here somewhere. We would probably also need a buffer here of soybeans for the exact same reason that we need one of the wheat here. Anything that needs processed should get its own buffer, because otherwise our overflow mechanism it'll overflow prematurely because the building can only hold so many internally. So I will poke around here. We'll, I suppose, need an external storage for the tofu. And I think these are all of the machines that we'll need, but I'll have to hook up a bunch of belts in order to make this work. But I think this is worth doing. So we're gonna hop in and take care of this real quick. All right, so I think this works. Definitely another layer of spaghetti here, but it fits and everything should go where it needs to go. First thing we'll do, I think we have the most excess of bread right now. So let's swap a wheat for a soybean. Here we go. Probably need to do that. I would bet we need to do that twice. We're gonna keep an eye on this. I will continuously rebalance this over time. But the soybeans will come along here, just as every other crop does. We will sort it out here. It will then pile up here and then come into the food processor itself. Food processor itself also receives, as you can see, it's starting to come in, sulfur and all limestone along this very long set of belts, but I'd rather do that than set up another pair of storages for no real extra reason. That all will come in here. And as we mentioned, we have tofu. The primary output comes up here, runs along top of the bread, comes out and posts up in an export storage for tofu, which we'll send over to the base. And remember to go get a market over there to drop it off. And it also spits out some of this animal feed here, where it meets up the animal feed from the mill. That input comes over here as well. Last thing is the water pipe right here. It connects up to this pipe. So I think this is it. I think this works. It'll take a minute to get to the soybean crop rotation itself. Let's go ahead and upgrade this real quick and use the second slot for the tofu. And then we'll be good on that. It'll take a minute to roll in, but then we'll have it. And we just got the electrolysis tech. Let's queue up wastewater treatment and come over and see how we're doing on ammonia. It does seem like we must be, let's see, how's our flare? Well, our flare has been doing some activity. That's the green, although that's actually bad for us in this situation. We don't want it burning anything if we can avoid it. It seems like it's less in recent years, but still non-zero. Maybe what we'll do is go ahead and put a balancer for overflow in here anyway and set up the electrolyzer, just so that we have it. I do want to make sure that we leave room here for the expansion of the sour water stripper, so I'm not going to build this. I'm just going to place it for a moment, just to give myself a little ghost to work around. But I'll hop in here and grab ourselves a little bit of a balancer and run it out to an electrolyzer. All right, I think this works. I just cleared out the extra sour water stripper, but we have space for it still. In fact, it fits perfectly, which is a lovely coincidence. So we will still prioritize export out to the rest of the base because we would like to have ammonia being primarily consumed for fertilizer. But in the case of overflow, as we mentioned, we'll take it, we'll rip out the nitrogen, which we can vent for no pollution, which is interesting. If you light this stuff on fire, it pollutes rather heavily. But if you break it into nitrogen and hydrogen, neither pollutes. In fact, hydrogen burns pretty cleanly. It just gives you some water back in terms of depleted steam if you put it in a boiler. We're not going to use it for anything quite yet. I just don't think we have enough of it to really reliably use it for anything. So for right now, we're going to store it and set an alert and say, hey, when it's getting full, remember to start thinking about this. But that is a problem for future me. And that guy's a sucker, so he'll have to deal with it. This should help us avoid some pollution here in the short term, though, which is pretty nice. We've also basically never had to, not never, but, well, apparently not in the last 12 years or so, haven't had to use the burner for sulfur, which is really good. I even think we're going to go ahead and clear it out. Ideally, we never use this, and so it seems like we're pretty close to ideal. So we're going to go ahead and save ourselves the pops and whatnot. Might even use this space as we expand, but until then. So let that go and then start to think about where we're going to do a wastewater treatment plant and eventually an incineration plant. I'm thinking about doing sort of a sanitation station out this way, a facility that handles all of our waste from our settlement. So that'll be the wastewater, which will run through this wastewater treatment plant. We'll have to give some filter media and chlorine, but we'll get back water and sludge, which we can turn into fuel gas. But more importantly, we won't be dumping it into the ocean anymore, which will be great. And the other thing that we'll do in this same area, we can run our waste through an incineration plant. Next thing we'll research, which will take, hey, some fuel gas or hydrogen, look at that, and a little bit of water, and instead of throwing our trash into the ocean, as we are currently doing, we will, at the cost of some exhaust, be able to turn it into steam. And, you know, it's not a ton of steam, but it is some steam, so we'll find a productive use for that as well. I tend to do these in the same area because they conceptually fit together in my head, but also because the wastewater treatment plant, if you process the sludge on site, creates the fuel gas that you'll need to potentially run the incineration plant anyway. So I've always found that to be a convenient pairing. So we'll probably try to do this in this space. I have, in case you haven't picked up, I've cleared a little bit of land in this area so that we have room to maneuver all of that. That will also require us to set up the actual intended, the primary reason that we got the electrolyzer technology, which will be to turn some brine into some chlorine. So I'll have to set that up on the coast here as well. But we'll do that all together at once when we have the various technologies. For now, though, let's take a beat, wait until, hey, look at that, we've got our very first tofu coming in. So glad to see this. Let's take a peek at our settlement. Hopefully the tofu is en route. And then we'll have ourselves a nice little health and unity bonus. Very good. Okay, a little while later, we have all of the technologies we need for our waste management facility. Before we walk through that though, let's take a moment to do a couple quick updates. One, I started a little terraforming project over here. It's not urgent, but I started thinking about how we'll eventually make our way over to this other island. I think there's another bridge at level 20 in our future, so I have taken the liberty of starting a ramp up and cutting through the mountain here. It's the exact same height as this plateau as well, so eventually we probably end up cutting the trees in, call it this row of tiles. We'll figure it out, but I think that's probably the best place to connect the islands. So I'm starting on it right now while we have the terraforming crew throughput. The other spot we're working on that front is out here. This is just to sort of flatten the dirt that's currently on this plateau now that the trees are cleared out, just to sort of, I guess, make the approach to this bridge a little bit smoother, but if anything, really more to take this dirt and help build this ramp. So that's the latest and greatest on the terraforming front. 2, I also paused this awkward cliff pipe here because I think now that we've got our thermal desalinator fully functioning out here and not even having to run at full speed really, between that and the full recovery of our groundwater reservoir out here, I think this pipe is officially superfluous, which is great because I find it really aesthetically unappealing. And so despite the fact that it still serves some flexible strategic purpose in the sense of being able to connect and share these two water mains, I just think that its aesthetic lack of value outweighs that mild strategic value. So I'm gonna go ahead and clear that out. Do with it what you will in your own save if you're playing along. I don't want it anymore, and so it is gone. 3, I'm also going to start delivering donations to settlements. So we haven't done much of this yet, but once we donate, we increase our reputation at each of these settlements individually on a 1-by-1 basis, right? What does that actually allow us to do? Well, it'll allow us to adopt more of their pops at a time. We get this all the way up to level 40. We will get a buffer of or level 4, excuse me, we'll get a buffer of up to 40 pops that we can adopt 10 at a time. And this will help us get out of pop crunches if we need to. But much more importantly, what it also does is unlock certain quick trades, right? Some of these are locked behind the reputation of certain villages, and the same is true of contracts. By the way, we haven't gotten into contracts yet. We certainly will in the future. I think broadly speaking, I certainly want to illustrate how that system works, but broadly speaking, I think in order to convince ourselves to expand out onto the map as much as possible, and build as many bridges as possible, we're going to probably try to do more local mining, even when we, could make a very clear argument for switching to a contract in an area. It's sort of an overall philosophical approach just to force us to spread out a bit. I find that contracts are, well, they're an important part of the game. They're also pretty powerful as they're currently balanced, and it's just easy to kind of put blinders on and then just build this tiny scrunched up base that has a ton of cargo depots. And that's a fun playstyle, I enjoy that, but I'm gonna try on this map specifically because the whole point is to spread out and use bridges and long distance trains and stuff. I'm gonna try to stay away from that on average, with certainly a few exceptions along the way. All right, so let's talk through a waste management facility. So the purpose of this is to reduce our pollution. So as you can see, the fact that we're no longer burning off so much heavy oil or ammonia and all of that has helped our pollution a pretty good amount, and in fact that has improved our health to the point where I'm no longer running the health boost edict. However, we can do better. For example, the water or the air pollution we'll come back to, but our water pollution, of course, increases over time as we throw more and more wastewater into the ocean. And the same is true with our landfill pollution, our waste that we're also throwing into the ocean. We can bring both of these to zero with a proper waste management facility. So the first thing we'll tackle is the wastewater itself. There's a aptly named wastewater treatment building that we will walk through here in a moment. But essentially, using one of the two recipes for now, we'll come back to the toxic slurry later into the game, but we can take the wastewater, we can mix it with more or less chlorine and either sand or filter media, which we'll talk about in a second, and we get back more or less water and more or less sludge. Sludge we can throw into an anaerobic digester, just as we do with our excess crops, and create fuel gas and compost. No pollution comes out of that, assuming you don't burn the sludge. So that's a wonderful upgrade in the sense of both reducing pollution and returning a whole bunch of water, by the way, not to mention producing some fuel gas. We'll be happy to have all of that, really. So the difference here between sand and filter media is something you make out of sand or manufactured sand, and gravel and coal. So we can put some of this together. It doesn't take a lot. And the other thing to keep in mind is that this can handle 160. That's actually quite a bit. We generate not that much. Call it a third, right? So this will be running, for now, at 1/3 capacity. That's going to provide 40 of the water that we need, though, right? That's pretty good. That's 2/3 of the water that we need. Something to keep in mind. We would, of course, prefer to recycle that back in. It's going to save us on water as well as reducing pollution. So that's one part, and as we said, we'll need an anaerobic digester, and in fact the ratio of these two buildings, 36:18, is 1:2. If this is running at 1/3 capacity, we don't need 2 right away, but we will eventually, so we'll slot it in when we build. So that's wastewater. I suppose we should also talk explicitly about the chlorine production. This is something we do in an electrolyzer from brine from the coastal desalination work. That'll create a bit of chlorine, in fact plenty of chlorine. We only need 16 and we need about 5 to 6 right now, considering the current throughput. So this is a pretty manageable amount. We're going to end up doing some coastal desalination as part of this setup, so we'll make as much of it as we can locally, but if we need to, we have plenty of space right out here as well, and we are still dumping not a lot, but some excess brine here because we are full up on salt. So we'll have the ability to make chlorine a couple different ways. We have finished donating, our ship is on its way back. Great. So the other thing we can do is stop throwing waste in the ocean using an incineration plant. So let's slap this down for a second and talk about it. It looks like 4 recipes. It's really just 2 variations on the same amount of water, same amount of exhaust. It spits out steam high, which is great. And you're either putting in waste or pressed waste. And the exact same amount of waste goes into making this amount of pressed waste. So it's really just, if you're doing it locally, use this. If you are transporting it, use this. It means that you have to do fewer truck trips or train trips or whatever it is that you're doing. You're using the same amount of fuel gas in any of these cases or hydrogen, which is nice, and you do have to provide a bit of water. The nice thing about this is that fuel gas, right, is something that we're going to be accidentally making here, so to speak, by processing our sludge. We make it elsewhere in the base too. If we need, we can bring it in, but why not use what's produced locally, at least predominantly? So we'll do that. And the question becomes, well, all right, where do we get the water? As we just mentioned, we're suddenly going to be producing a whole bunch of extra around here. And what do we do with the steam? So you could put this into turbines, use it for power, and even prioritize it above your other power sources. If you have the ability to do this near a power plant, I do sometimes try to do run this steam into a balancer and cut off any of the boilers with priority that are also running power for that turbine. We're nowhere near a power turbine right now. The other thing we could do with it, though, is run it in a thermal desalinator, right? It's enough to do 1.5 of these if it were running the whole time, and it's not running the whole time yet. So this would produce, hey, some of the brine we need and some of the water that we need to sort of fill out the remaining amounts of water to cover our settlement and our incineration plant's water use. That'll allow us to completely disconnect from this water pipe as well, so we can stop running pipes down cliffs entirely and save this reservoir a little bit of work, which is not the end of the world. It's plenty large, but as our farming setup increases, the water demand for it will also increase, so it'll be nice to decouple these as well. So that's the overall structure. We'll have to set up a filter media production as well. I suppose that's the last building we'll need. It probably makes sense. It's slightly compressive. It's a little bit better to transport 36 filter media instead of 39 total pieces here. But I think that the ease of manufacturing is probably the more important thing here. It's not a huge difference. So we have sand out here. We could, really the gravel plus further crushed rock into manufactured sand, or sand here, is probably the answer. We even have coal. So I think we'll probably try to snake around and produce filter media in this area. Let's just say something like here. We'll use it in the future for a couple other things. It's processing at the wastewater treatment plant itself, either the wastewater or in the future toxic slurry, but we are not producing any toxic slurry just yet. So I think we'll build this here. Go ahead and drag that building over. But other than that, I think these are all the pieces we needed to talk through, and I should just hop in and sketch it all out, and then we'll walk through the layout. See you in a moment. All right, so I think this is the general layout. We'll have to do a few last couple connections, but we'll have to delete the active pipes while doing it, so I'm gonna wait until the very last moment to do that, but you will see, I think, the logic here already. So the wastewater comes out into the wastewater treatment plant where it's mixed up with filter media brought in by truck and chlorine. We'll talk about the chlorine sourcing in a moment, but there is a truck backup. And the water comes out here and is prioritized into what will be our big water balancer in this area. The other output, the sludge, comes out here and is immediately digested in these anaerobic digesters. As mentioned, we'll just build probably the one for now and leave the other blueprinted for when we hit the halfway point on our production at 80. The compost output comes out here on this belt and is sent away. The other output from the anaerobic digester, the fuel gas, comes out here and it hits a pipe balancer where it prioritizes going out to the incineration plant. So I think we're going to make enough to run the plant based on the processing of the sludge. But if that's not the case, we'll just flip this around and make it a bring fuel gas in storage instead of a take out any excess storage. So this is oriented, I think, the right way, but fixing it is as simple as rotating it back around and flipping the direction of the pipe. The incineration plant then, of course, spits out some exhaust, and actually now as I look at it, a future-proof, whoops, wrong thing, a future-proof version of this would actually be the larger smokestack because this 72 will be more than we can handle with just a basic smokestack. So let's just get out ahead of that now. The steam comes out here, and we are going to put directly into our desalinator. So that 18 eventually will be enough to run 2 of these, so I've left room in this area to expand. But it requires seawater, and so we've used a seawater pump, and I've selected the wrong recipe, whoops. We're also using a tall one, because the slope of dirt, which we've layered on here instead of just the rock and trash in this area, the slope is longer, and in order to both sit on the edge of the 5 height and still be able to reach down, we have to use the tall version of this, which I suppose is a bummer, but is really just, the difference is just it's parts 3 instead of parts 2. I don't think it's anything else is really an issue there. This should be sufficient. From here, we're going to spit out some water and some brine. Now the brine we'll try to run as much as possible through our electrolyzer, output here, and the excess we will send to this liquid dump. So let's add that recipe in here. The water, we still have to draw this pipe, but I'll probably just reuse this one, honestly, because it'll end up being potentially relatively large. We'll just send it through this way. And it will also then, after some adjustments, connect into this balancer, and it will be lower priority than coming directly from the wastewater treatment, but we'll still want to backfill it. The water for the incineration plant also comes from the same balancer. The potential issue here is, what about the world where we generate more steam and therefore more water than we actually consume over here? We are going to have to think about that. I don't know that we're going to have to deal with it quite yet, but if we do, well, I guess we could either overflow that steam into a cooling tower, which we would then take that water and dump it anyway, or we could just say, well, we're still going to run it and we'll just throw the water out too. So we'll probably have to set up a little bit of a balancer there, but the priority will be to dispose of the steam, and if that means unnecessarily cycling water in and out of the ocean, I guess that's not the worst thing that could ever happen. So what we're going to do is build everything so far, and once that's all built, I'll do the pipe changes as well. I've also, if you hadn't noticed, moved the waste collection over here. We can delete this one, otherwise it'll split the outputs. We do want to get rid of this fella. So I think for now, we'll simply let our construction fleet get all of this spun up, and then we will make those final connections. I suppose the other thing we should do is, we said we'd bring in as a backup any chlorine that we needed that we didn't already have. I suppose we will probably need to actually have some backup chlorine in order to be able to do that. So let's go ahead and set this up here. We'll prioritize both of these equally and say dump only if you can't do anything else. But let's go ahead and set up an export storage here for the chlorine as well. There we go. Hopefully that starts to get us a little bit of chlorine to at least jumpstart this process too, since we are going to have to create the salt water this way. And we can't do that without the steam, and we can't do this without the fuel gas, so on and so forth. So, although I suppose our trucks seem to be willing to bring stuff over to it. Whoops. I suppose we can change these if we need to, but let's go ahead, and I think it's time to make all the various pipe changes too. So I'm going to jump in and do that. All right, I think that should do it. We're now sending a whole bunch of nice, clean drinking water through the old sewage pipe, so hopefully they rinsed it real good first, but we have flipped it around and sent it the other direction. We are, in fact, I think, making some chlorine, hopefully. If not, we are still bringing some in, so that's good. And, oh, the filter media. Yeah, so I had to go ahead and set up the filter media. Completely blanked on that. Let's get that all insta-built. So how does that work? Well, we're going to use the gravel manufactured sand coal recipe. Coal, we simply run all the way out and around. Here, we take our gravel and we say some of it can go along here to the mixer. Some of it comes in through this crusher to be turned into manufactured sand. So we don't need to be able to supply this all continuously. That's enough to make a 36 filter media, which is what, like 4.5 times more than we would use if that were running at full speed and it's only running at a third. So this should be plenty, but in the shorter term, let's go ahead and give it a quick boost at the bottlenecks of its production so that we are able to get up and running over here a little bit faster. That is otherwise going to cause us a bit of trouble here, but that's okay. We will live. So, in the meanwhile, the chlorine is coming in. I suppose the issue here will be that we don't have enough steam, presumably, unless we are burning the trash. So, we can kill the other trash collection spot, and now everything should come out here. I might move the biomass as well. I'm thinking we kind of use it most up here to grind up, but we also do send it to some boilers as backup, so maybe I will simply relocate it to this corner. Not super critical, but might as well. So it does seem like we can't quite reach in to drop off the compost here. So we're going to create a, let's just say very small storage where it is possible to drop off, not requests, but possible to drop off if you need to. And let me go ahead and instant build that as well. Started paving all these places, if you haven't noticed. Not a huge rush, but it just makes things cleaner, easier to see. All right, so I think we are working here, and in fact have gotten through our wastewater backlog. Very good. So the first bits, obviously, of filter media have come in, and we are going to continue to bring in chlorine, although I think our local manufacturing of it should speed up here a little bit. Let's see. The issue will be, as we said, if we have steam backing up, but it seems like, yeah, we do have some backing up in this pipe. So I think we are going to have to think about the idea of an overflow balancer that dumps excess water, which is a bummer, but also not the end of the world. This should work. And hopefully that keeps this guy going. The other thing I suppose we could do would be to at least use an export buffer, now that I think about it. Let's maybe do that. So what I mean by that is, well, wouldn't it be nice if we at least had the opportunity to store and export it instead of continuously dumping it? What if we need water somewhere just a little bit? Wouldn't it be better if it came from here? So let's do that, but we will of course have to say that, well, if it does get full, we will have to go ahead and dump the remainder. And this will do us the other favor of making the shared pipe further closer to the liquid dump, which will make the whole system a little bit more responsive. It won't have to sit here and wait for the little bit of brine to go all the way through the pipe before it lets any water in, etc. I think the other thing it's fairly safe to say is that if we are occasionally dumping water over here, not so often, but occasionally, then we definitely don't need this pipe. So I think we can go ahead and clear this one out along with the 2 water pumps that were currently or previously feeding it, which is great since we've added another pump over here. Hopefully this means that we balance out on the reservoir. That's what it's there for. It's good to use, but it's nice to be responsible with it so we don't find ourselves in a pinch later. I think everything's working okay over here. We have built up a little bit of a tofu buffer, not a huge amount. Depends on the harvest timing, of course, and it does look like we're starting to back up on the crop, so it might be time to add another anaerobic digester here. Oh, and you know what else we need to do is make sure that we add the soybean recipe to all of our anaerobic digesters here. Not that we have any excess soybeans, we're still building them up, but eventually that's going to be important. All right, hopefully that helps out. None of these is above 20, so I think we are okay to still be on just a tier 1 belt. Hopefully that throughput is sufficient. You know what else we never did was actually add in a proper balancer here for this storage. Let's do that real quick. Move this 3 tiles this way, I think. Okay, hopefully that helps. We do need to make sure that we have that. Again, not a problem until this is full, but once it is, this whole line would back up because we had nothing else to do with the excess soybeans. Should have done that and adding this recipe here back when we added the crops in the first place, but hey, better late than never. And again, it was before any actual real impact, so very good. Back over here though, I think we're doing pretty well. It seems like everything is running just fine. Are we doing most of our chlorine locally? I think we are. We have more than trucks would have brought over. So we'll see, let's say let me know if it ever gets full, just because I'm curious. It doesn't matter if it backs up, we'll simply dump the excess. That's what the saltwater overflow is for in the first place. But I think that makes this a fully functional waste management treatment center. Very good. Let's take a peek at how that has impacted, our pollution. Wastewater to 0. We do no more water pollution. In fact, let's just remove ships, trains, vehicles real quick. You can see water pollution goes to 0. Our waste pollution will take a little bit longer to wash out, but it is slowly going to 0. And in fact, one last thing to do, we don't have anything on the global dumping designations, but it's probably worth saying, hey, get out of here. Waste storage. We are not going to dump anything else in our stacker. Hey, speaking of which, great timing. I think he's just finished up out here. Actually, you know what? Rather than setting up a whole new stacker, we're going to take a bit of a beat to fill in all of the little pockmark holes it leaves. But also, I don't think it's worth setting up a stacker just to fill in these little areas here. We're just going to do that manually by hand for a bit as well. So we'll come back and set up a new one later on, I'm sure. Let's go ahead, clear all that out, and say that rock and slag are back on the menu for the global dumping designation. Dirt is still only being dumped in this area, according to this mine tower. Although, as I mentioned, we've shifted our focus away from edging this little coastline to coming out here and building this ramp, which is coming along. All right, I think we're gonna do two last little things here. The first is just to let you know, up here, we started to run out of fertilizer 2 all of a sudden. What happened there? Well, we are low on sulfur, and that has been, well, it's due to two things. One, our decreased demand for diesel, as we've gotten more efficient here over the course of the episode, has meant that we are generating less byproducts overall. Keep that in mind. We're going to talk about something else where that's true in a moment. But that has particularly meant, well, not so much on the sulfur front. And as a result, that combined with the fact that we're consuming more sulfur over here to make tofu means that, yeah, we're kind of hurting a little bit on the ability to provide it for this last stage of fertilizer. So what I did, just to make sure that we are at least providing something to our farms, is to at least have a backup here of fertilizer 1. So we will still, let's say, prioritize here when we have the fertilizer 2, and we'll get more sulfur in pretty short order, actually. Put a pin in that. But we will still want to make sure that even if we don't have fertilizer 2, well, we at least need to have some fertilizer 1. And we can definitely keep that going. We still have the ammonia over here. We still have the oxygen naturally. And in fact, we have so much organic fertilizer that we're kind of backing up on the compost. Now we could just dump that, it's not really a problem, but if we can use it to get back into the green on fertilizer, instead, we're gonna do that. The other thing I wanted to mention, you've probably seen little bits of red here and there over the course of the second half of the episode. What's happening there is, as I mentioned, as we're not generating as much diesel, we're not demanding as much diesel, we're not generating as much byproduct, we're not keeping this now expanded oil power plant running as frequently. So you can see that we do not have 100% uptime. We would only ever expect 75% because one of these boilers is only ever going to run at 50% the way we have it set up. But at the same time, it's not running at that. And so we're swinging back over to our fully functional coal/biomass/animal feed backup boiler, and it works great. It's just that when we swing back and forth, we get that intermittent little bit of red here and there. And the way that we are sort of ameliorating that has been to let our old school diesel generators pop every so often, but these guys just don't have a lot of throughput. However, what we do have is the recently researched diesel generator 2. Now this guy takes a similar ratio, so it's like 6 of these, or at least the input of 6 of these, but instead of getting the output of 6 of these, which would be 6x 800 kilowatts would be just under 5 megawatts. It's actually a little bit more efficient. So we'll take that. We do get a bit of exhaust, but this should actually make the make these swings a little bit more palatable for us. So hopefully that helps smooth things out. It's really not the end of the world if we do get a bit of flashing red here and there. It just means that in the 2 seconds that's the case, some of our machines are temporarily offline. We'd rather not have to deal with that though, so that should smooth things out. Very good. The other nice thing that it does is, well, this whole thing happens when we are capped on diesel, right? And therefore not making byproducts. Well, if we consume some diesel, it's a nice way to buffer the system. So as I hinted, we'll generate more sulfur once we install exhaust scrubbers. I had hoped to get these installed this episode, but we are running a bit long, so we're gonna have to push it to the next one, unfortunately. It was solid work today though. Our refinery got cleaner and more efficient today. We got distillation stage 3 naphtha stuff installed today. We've got overflow ammonia turning into hydrogen. Our power plants have increased in capacity and also got the low pressure turbines on them. And this really helped cut back on our overall pollution. At the beginning of the episode, we were really burning through a bunch of excess byproducts, and now we don't even have quote unquote enough byproducts. We are definitely able to absorb all of them, and that's really helped out with our air pollution. Of course, it spikes, it's a very spiky thing, but it's definitely lower than it was. And if you check out our water pollution, because the other thing we did was our waste management facility, and that fella got us all the way down on water, and we are pretty much done with waste pollution as well. So well done to our little waste management facility, who is also generating some lovely excess fuel gas for us. So that was all excellent work, I think. Pretty good day for our citizens' health. We also just threw in, thermal desalination in a couple spots, and we got tofu for our folks as well. They must be happy. They better be happy. That's it for today, though. I'm going to post the save file on the Discord again. I'll add snapshots of the updated refinery as well as the waste management facility, and let's say the updated crop processing as well, so that you have them as references if you find that helpful. I also went back and added a snapshot of the rail loop that we installed back in episode 4 by popular demand, so if that's something that you wished you had or would still like, hey, it's there now too. So another fun one. I'm still having a blast with this. I hope you are too. And if you are, make sure to stop by again next time. Exhaust scrubbers are super satisfying to install, and we're going to take pollution levels even lower. Until the next one though, have a great rest of your day, and bye-bye.